Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This is going to be my Declutter Regrets, all about my sleek eyeshadow palette collection. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Who remembers sleek eyeshadow palettes? Well, I do, because back in 2018, I filmed a video showing you all of my sleek eyeshadow palettes, and today we're going to be going over all of them because I decluttered all of these eyeshadow palettes since then. So let me show you that video and let me talk you through at the same time, and then we'll get to it. Before we get into the video, it may be good to know who I am and what I like doing on this channel. My name is Moira. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I feel about makeup. I have been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. I love trying out eyeshadow palettes, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of my makeup. So if that's something you're interested in, then I hope you'd like to consider subscribing. So yes, sleek eyeshadow palettes is going to be the topic of today's video, but before we get to it, I want to throw something at you, and I hope you can give me some feedback in the comments below. Because I have been doing this series where I talk about eyeshadow palettes I've decluttered and sort of go about, like, do I regret getting rid of these, or is it something I don't regret? However, I haven't, of course, only decluttered eyeshadow palettes in my day. I have been filming makeup collection declutter since 2017, ever since I started moving to this place. So what I could also do is maybe revamp this series and sort of do the video in the style I'm doing it today, where I take old videos of mine, be it declutters or be it collection videos like I'm doing here, and talk you through whether I am regretting decluttering any of these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play my old video from 2018, and I'm going to sort of start when we start seeing the eyeshadow palettes and sort of do a voiceover, talk you through, and have me like sitting like somewhere in the corner of the screen to talk through whether I regret decluttering any of these. So let me know in a comment down below if you like this style of video and if you want to see me do this with other videos I've done in the past and sort of give this series a new lease of life and do this in a slightly different way than I used to. So I don't show all the fronts of these sleek eyeshadow palettes, but they were incredibly sleek, hence the name of the brand, I think. And this is the Rockstar collection, I believe. This was a line of all shimmer palettes that Sleek used to do. e.l.f. did something similarly, if I remember correctly, and I never used this. I never used an all shimmer palette. It was very colorful. The shimmers inside it, I do excuse the blurry footage here. It gets better in the rest of the video, I promise. But I was just never really using it, so I don't regret getting rid of this. In fact, I think this was one of the first eyeshadow palettes from Sleek I ever got rid of because I just wasn't using it. And the first one that was one of the bigger 12 pen palettes they did is this Nautical collection, Calm Before the Storm. And this is one that I got rid of completely. There's just one Sleek palette living in a makeup memory box as a reminder. But this one I kind of regret not putting in that makeup memory box and throwing it away completely. As you can see, this is a blue palette with some neutrals in, and this was one of my favorite palettes in my entire makeup collection for years. The reason why I got rid of it and why I should not regret decluttering it is because I have so many other blue tone palettes, especially also blue tone palettes with neutrals in. For instance, my Blueberry Muffin from BH Cosmetics, I think can easily dupe this. It's perhaps less green, but I can definitely sort of make that work for myself. This eyeshadow palette, though, was one of my favorites, so I feel I should have hung on to it for that reason alone, because I love this palette so much. But at the end of the day, it was superfluous in my makeup collection, so that's why it had to go. This next one was the Garden of Eden, and I remember this not being 100% the same quality as my other Sleek palettes. It's greens with neutrals. I have come into many more green eyeshadow palettes since then, and that's why I ended up decluttering this. It just became a little bit superfluous in my makeup collection for sure, and something that Sleek really did was only doing mattes and shimmers in their collections, and that's why this didn't end up being my total favorite eyeshadow palette in the end, but this was one of my favorites from Sleek as well, which is why I kind of regret not putting this one in a makeup memory box either. The next palette here is the Sunset palette, and here you can see that sort of 2016 makeup vibe with warm tones with a pop of blue. I used to love that bright blue on the lower lash line. It has those spicy warm tones that we were all loving back in the day. Again, I have plenty of other palettes that do warm tones with a pop of blue, so this became superfluous in my makeup collection, but this was one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes from Sleek for sure. I loved it at the time, I used it a lot, but I had so many other things come in my collection since then that were just better quality that this had to go. The next eyeshadow palette is the On the Horizon, and this looks very similarly to the Sunset. It's slightly less on the spicy side, it has more true neutrals in, and it has more greens rather than blues, but it was very orange heavy. Like you would get a very orange look with this, I remember, and some of those light shades were all pretty identical. Again, the same sort of mattes with satins and not a whole lot of interest in terms of textures in this one, which is why as my collection grew and makeup quality started to change, so this really fell by the wayside for me for that reason. It just became superfluous in my makeup collection yet again, and that's why I really don't regret getting rid of this one. If I look at this color story, I can very easily dupe this out, and I didn't need to keep this one around for sure. But because the Sleek palette packaging was so easy to handle with the very sleek packaging, I kept this around for a long time, all of these palettes, because they just didn't take up a lot of space. This next palette was the Enchanted Forest, and I think you can see where some of my makeup preferences are coming from nowadays, because this was my favorite color stories they did. It didn't quite come together, though, but those berry tones with the teal and those pops of purple it had, really, like, this made me realize that I love cool tones. It just, as a palette as a whole, it didn't quite come together for me, and it was one of the later ones I bought, so I wasn't using it, because at that time, I started to realize that the Sleek eyeshadow quality, while it was decent, I had definitely other things in my collection that were better. So not a regret for this one, but I definitely felt that I kept these around for a long time for a reason. Even though a lot of people weren't loving these anymore, I still ended up loving my Sleek palettes for sure. This next one is the Vintage Romance, and I remember comparing this to another palette in my collection in either a palette declutter or collection video that I did, and realizing on the spot that this was so similar to the Heritage palette from Zoeva. I still have all my old Zoeva palettes. Those were better quality than this, so that's why I ended up decluttering this. It had the golds with the berries and those purples, which I really loved. This was one of my favorite Sleek palettes in my collection. So I kind of regret getting rid of it because it was one of my favorites, but yet again, because I had something better in my collection that did the same thing, I felt okay letting go of this in the end. This next one is Nordic Skies, and I think this is a palette that perfectly shows you why I am so into washes of color with like very light pops of pastels sometimes. This is where my fair skin friendly makeup love started. This palette though wasn't the best. It was one of the last Sleek palettes I bought, and quality wise I really feel it didn't live up to other Sleek palettes I had. The pastels were very chalky and didn't do much, but this is why I like K-Beauty palettes so much, because they give me that wash of color, and this was one of the first palettes I tried personally that did that for me. So great nostalgia here, but I don't regret decluttering this because it just wasn't good quality. This next one is the All Night Long, and I definitely had some good neutral palettes in my collection as well from Sleek, but because I had so many other neutral palettes that again were so much better quality than these were, I ended up decluttering all of them, save for one which is still in my makeup memory box. But this very much gives me ABH sultry vibes, and I've even decluttered that palette over time and sort of changed it around. So I felt that this was again one of the later ones as well. It was good, but by this point, I really got tired of Sleek just doing the same thing. And by the time they started doing this, eyeshadow palette quality had just become so much better, and they just stuck to their same old formula. And I feel that that's why a lot of people stopped liking them, because I feel we just moved on as a makeup community from this kind of eyeshadow style and started to prefer and like other things. Was this bad quality? Not at all, but this just wasn't getting the love as some of the older Sleek palettes I had in my collection had. not for me and not from other people. So I definitely feel that this is when Sleek started slipping away from people's minds. And then my original favorite Sleek palette, the Au Naturel. This was my Naked 2 palette before I ever owned a Naked 2 palette. The waffle pattern gives it away because when Sleek got started, we got this waffle pattern in all of their eyeshadows. And this was old, but this was one of my favorites. It's perhaps, now that I look at it in the video, it's not as cool toned as the Naked 2 even, but that light row was really one of my favorites. I was using this when I first got into makeup, so using very dark shades, which is something that made me very nervous, but you can definitely see that I wore through the waffle pattern in some of these shades, and that shimmer in the right top corner was one of my favorites for years. So this is one that's still in a makeup memory box. I never got totally rid of it, but this is so old. But this goes back to like 2009, so this is at least 15 years old, so no longer safe to be putting onto my eyes at all. But I wanted to keep one Sleek palette in a makeup memory box as a memory to how much I love these eyeshadow palettes. I already mentioned that I could have kept so many others, but because this was one of the oldest ones and the ones that really taught me how to do makeup, I felt was a better memory box palette to keep than some of the blue tones and bright things that I showed you at the start, even though I love those as well. But if I keep all of the makeup I've ever tried, I would need a second house to store it all, which is not feasible as well. So the Au Naturel, I really hold near and dear to my heart. Rest in peace, Au Naturel. The next one is the Oh So Special, and here you can see my love for like the rosy tones come in. This was my Naked 3 palette before I ever had a Naked 3 palette, you could say. This was a bit weird though, because there were some true bright pinks in here, and then this random blue that didn't go with anything else in the palette. It had some really lovely things in. Again, the waffle pattern, so this was one of the first ever Sleek eyeshadow palettes I tried. But since then, I have tried so many other rosy tone palettes that I just prefer. And yeah, this was a good one as well. Again, a lot of nostalgia with this one here, but I don't regret getting rid of this. Next up is an all matte palette, and this is the Ultra Mattes version 2. And the only reason why this survived in my makeup collection for such a long time was the bright darker green in the right hand bottom corner. The other shades I kind of use from time to time as well, but to put entire looks together, I never liked this. I just really struggled finding good green tones for a long time. But back when I was filming this video in 2018, that was the year I got into colorful makeup. And so I had a couple of these Sleek palettes to sort of play around with color. But then as my confidence with colorful makeup grew and I started to explore colorful eyeshadows a lot more, I found much better quality colorful eyeshadow that I ended up liking so much more. So that's why this one is definitely one that fell by the wayside for me. No longer useful in my makeup collection. I have so many other mattes in very similar colors to this in my makeup collection that are far better than these ever were. So that's why the Sleek Ultra Mattes version 2, I believe it was one that became superfluous as well. This is the Storm palette. Can you see how much I've used that steely blue in there? Wow. That was one of my favorite shades in this palette. That was what I reached for all the time. It was sort of jewel tones, but not quite. I really like those light shades at the top at the time. The black one came cracked when I got it in. This is one I ordered online. I think this was actually my first Sleek palette because it didn't even have like the sort of solid plastic in between the pans. But this was already nostalgic back when I was filming this video, actually. I was only ever using it for that steel blue, wasn't really using the rest. Couldn't really put looks together with this because everything was so light, which when I first got into makeup, I really loved because dark shades just make me so nervous. But this again, I can dupe a million times over in my makeup collection, and therefore I feel it's not something that I personally needed to keep in my makeup collection at all because I just have so many jewel tones and like these lovely steel blues. I know I have a single from Sydney Grace in my singles collection that does the exact same thing, but in a far better formula than this ever was. Next up is the Lagoon palette, and this is again one of those colorful palettes that I owned before I ever got into color and understood color theory and putting things together on my eyes with colorful shades. I liked a couple of shades in here for a long time, like the teals and the purpley blues, those were really lovely. I really enjoyed that periwinkle sort of purpley shade in the bottom row. Those were all great bottom lash line shades, but I never really used it for anything else. Again, I started venturing out into more colorful makeup when I was filming this video in that year. So this is not something that I needed to keep around because I had so many other colorful palettes that were far better. So don't regret decluttering that one. This palette I won in a giveaway, according to the video I'm putting in the background here. This is the Showstoppers palette, and I believe the idea behind it, if I remember correctly, was that they put one shade from each best-selling palette into this palette, and it came to this sort of metallic but slightly neutral palette as well. This was one, because it was a color story I hadn't picked myself, that I really wasn't reaching for a whole lot. So that's why this eyeshadow palette was definitely one I didn't reach for at all. It just sat in the back of a makeup collection, and I know I got rid of this one pretty quickly, and I don't regret decluttering it. And then another old sleek palette. This was in my collection for a long time because I loved the neons in here, and I didn't have any other neon shades in my makeup collection. This is the Acid palette, and it was one of the first very bright, colorful eyeshadow palettes I ever owned in my makeup collection. I remember loving putting that neon green in my inner corner. That was definitely a vibe, like an all neutral look, and just popping that neon green in the inner corner was my life. Didn't really use any of the other shades though. Again, it has a waffle pattern, which definitely ages this palette terribly. Did I still need this? No. I now have some neons in my Surge palette from Blend Bunny, so didn't need to keep that. Oh yeah. And the final sleek palette I used to own is the Good Girl palette. This was a limited edition. I remember there being a Good Girl and a Bad Girl palette, and I believe the Bad Girl was like a smoky eye palette, and the Good Girl was all pink. There were some shades in here that I did enjoy, but this is how I thought, like why I thought pink eyeshadow never looked right on me, because it gave me pink eye. It is this palette right here. This eyeshadow palette just didn't really work for me because of the undertones. As you can see, it was very sort of coral on the bottom row. So I was reaching more so for those brighter, almost cotton candy kind of shades in the top half. Those I reach for if I reach for this palette, but I still feel I struggle with pinks. And I now have something like the Strawberry Milkshake from Unearthly Cosmetics that has a lot of pinks and reds in. So if I want to go pink and bright and colorful, I would personally go for that and contrast it with some green, because I think that makes for a great juxtaposition, having pinks and greens together. So this is a lovely little eyeshadow palette. I don't regret getting rid of it at all because this is not my color story, and I definitely have something better in my collection. So that's it. There you have it. Those are all of the sleek eyeshadow palettes that I used to own at some point. I definitely don't regret getting rid of any of those. Perhaps the blue one that you saw all the way at the start of the video, the Calm Before the Storm, that's the only one where I'm like, I should have just put it in a makeup memory box. But as I mentioned throughout the video, I don't want to overflow my makeup memory box with all the palettes I would love to keep around, because it's just not feasible. I would need a second house somewhere, or like a storage unit, to keep all of my old makeup in, which is like expired and I can no longer use. So this is not something that was feasible for me to keep all of these around. So I'm still glad to have one sleek palette to help me reminisce. And of course I have the content that I made with all of those eyeshadow palettes, because I think I reviewed all of them. Maybe like one or two I didn't. But I definitely did this video, and I did some like swatches, I think, over on the blog way back when. So I definitely did a lot of content with them before I got rid of any of them. So if I want to reminisce and see what the quality of these was like, I just need to go back to my blog and my YouTube channel and like go back a couple of years, and then I can definitely find it all. So yes, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Let me know what you think of this new format. I would love to hear your thoughts. And then I hope you'd like to stay tuned for more, and I will be back with a new video very, very soon. So thumbs it up, and then I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye.